regulations on campaign finance go back more than 120 years. Let's start with the McCain-Feingold Act of 2002. McCain-Feingold put a cap on the amount that candidates and their parties could spend in an election, and they prevented outside groups from paying for political advertising for 2 months before a general election or 30 days before a primary. McCain-Feingold, combined with a pre-existing system of matching funds from tax returns, worked to reduce, though not eliminate, the influence of money in politics. The first presidential election under McCain-Feingold, Michael Moore's film Fahrenheit 9/11, quite critical of George Bush, was showing. A group called Citizens United sued, arguing that commercials for Fahrenheit 9/11 were in effect political ads and therefore couldn't be shown during the 60 days before the election. The FEC rejected this argument, saying that the film was legitimate commercial activity. So the Citizens United group made its own film criticizing Hillary Clinton and planned to show it 4 years later. But the Federal Election Commission decided that Hillary the movie wasn't a real commercial or artistic enterprise, just a long anti-Clinton political ad. Commercials for this movie couldn't be shown in the 30 days before the election. Citizens United appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court went way beyond what Citizens United had asked for and struck down McCain-Feingold in its entirety. The court's decision was that political spending is free speech and therefore is protected by the First Amendment, and by a narrow 5-4 vote, struck down any and all legal limits on corporate spending on political issues or political campaigns. The majority decision went further, saying that unlimited spending by corporations didn't give rise to corruption or even to the appearance of corruption.
Crazy talk, crazy talk.
I want to try to be fair about the Supreme Court decision. I won't pretend to be neutral about it. There are 3 parts to it. Let's take them one at a time. The first, that political spending is part of free speech, seems quite reasonable. Part of free speech is using whatever resources you have to amplify that speech. It is permissible to limit even First Amendment rights if there's a compelling state interest. The court went on to make 2 additional assertions, which attempted to show that there was no compelling state interest here. Corruption as a legal concept is pretty much whatever the Supreme Court decides it is. But in terms of the appearance of corruption, we know that more than 80% of Americans think that money has too much influence on our political system. How about the reality of the influence of money on our political system? Let's hear from both a Republican and a Democrat. Here's John McCain reflecting on the experience of listening to the oral arguments in the Citizens United case.
And the questions they asked showed they had not the slightest clue as to what a political campaign is all about and the role of money that it plays in political campaigns. And I remember when Russ and I walked out of there, I said, Russ, we're going to lose. And it's because they are clueless.
They don't know, they don't know, they don't know.
Why in God's name does Wall Street make huge campaign contributions? I guess just for the fun of it. They want to throw money around. Why does the pharmaceutical industry make huge campaign contributions? Any connection, maybe, to the fact that our people pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs?
2 very common arguments which are used to suggest that money really doesn't have that much influence in politics. The first points out correctly that both parties get a tremendous amount of money. The problem is that unless the only thing we're worried about is which party is privileged more by an unjust campaign financing system, all that shows is that both parties are too influenced by campaign contributions. It's also true that the presidential candidate who raises the most money doesn't always win. The presidency is such a high-profile campaign that inevitably voters learn as much as they need to know about both candidates. In general, the more high-profile a campaign is, the harder it is for additional money to make a difference. One of the things we'll talk about in the second part of the video is how campaign financing works out on the state and local level.
Listen to the money talk.